be educated. Now, everybody, today we're going to do something a little different. A subject I really like. I don't talk about enough, but I was thinking about it because I had an experience, and I'll always share my experience. Sometimes I overshare, and it's about past lives. So let's just get started. But I kind of named it, you might be remembering someone else's life, right? And this one's kind of interesting. Is it a past life? Is it genetic memory or ancestral memory? And what hypnosis actually unlocks, right? I mean, when I say things like genetic memory, people go, is that really true? But there's those studies with rats where they take a rat and make it terrified of a smell. It's some kind of fruit smell that should make the rat excited, but I think they electric shock them every time they get the smell. And a couple of generations later, the rats are afraid of that smell. They never had any experience with it, right? So anyway, but the more we know, the more we discover we don't know.
What if you've been trying to influence people the hard way? Most people learn techniques. I teach the system underneath. Not NLP, not sales, not psychology. Understanding people. FBI negotiation, behavioral profiling, NLP, waking hypnosis. Within 1 minute, you'll begin seeing things you've been missing. You won't just learn techniques. You won't just learn techniques. You'll become the person people trust. Become the person people trust.
One day, you'll stop wondering what to say.
You'll become the person people trust.
Licensed psychologist, crisis negotiation trained, 40 plus years teaching NLP, master hypnotist, founder of NFNLP, thousands trained worldwide. The human brain, a universe of golden pathways. We communicate, and these connections ignite. Thoughts flow, bridging the gap between us. You are capable of extraordinary things. Find your courage. Oh. Thank you all. Some trainings give you information. This one changes the way you see people. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Some people spend a lifetime trying to understand people. We'll show you how to start in 2 days. I'll see you in Marlboro.
As I think Einstein said that, And I'll share two memories for sure and how I've been working on it that were never really mine. One was on a vaudeville stage and another was on a Roman battlefield. And they kind of surfaced the same way, under hypnosis, kind of uninvited, what they were. And we'll talk about 4 different ways to explain them because, I like to do that kind of stuff. And I've been doing this for 40 years, all this stuff, right? And I will be convinced and always share, the more I know, the less I realize I understand. And it keeps changing. And those of us around this for a while, Billy, Bruce, Karen, the things we talked about in the 80s and 90s that like, this is hypnosis. Now we have the science backing it up, the reticular activating system, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so what surfaces in a regression? And I made the mistake of saying deep hypnotic trance. It doesn't have to be deep, just a hypnotic trance. In fact, I would argue there could be a whole talk on why certain movies, songs, and things like that, books resonate with you. Is it igniting something inside like this? But what happens is when you're in a relaxed state, a hypnotic state, you might have sensory experiences that feel like memories from another lifetime. A name, a place, a death, a fear that never seemed to have an origin, or a talent that just seems it's a one-off in your whole family. Okay? And it doesn't arrive as a fact. It arrives as a feeling with a face on it, because then your brain's trying to make sense of it. Because there's a book I'm reading now, our brain hates randomness, right? It wants to codify something and make an explanation when sometimes it's just, as we were talking before we started, right place, right time, or wrong place, wrong time. Okay? But 4 ways to explain this kind of thing is literal past lives. It's an echo of a life you lived before. That could be it. We don't know. Could be in an ancestral or genetic memory, right? Something that is passed down through your genetic code. Your genetic code alters based on survivability, things like that. Science supports the idea of inherited stress and fear responses in epigenetic studies, right? It's not the scenes, but it's those kind of things. One of my favorites is, what if it's a collective unconsciousness, the Jungian, the collective consciousness. You're tapping into that, right? Maybe your vibration at that moment, your thought patterns click into another one, right? And it's a shared human story surfacing as if it's really personal. It's Jung's archetypes. It's why archetypes resonate with you in different ways, and then, it's the main, it's basically your mind's making it up. This is the mainstream psychological view, that hypnosis lowers the filter that stops imagination from feeling like a memory, and those of us that's ever used creating false memories, but for a good purpose, this is what would be described, right? And for what we're doing, the hypnosis doesn't create the memory. It removes what usually gets in the way, right? It narrows attention, quiets the critical mind, the overactive mind, as my buddy likes to call it, the monkey mind. And it lets the imagination and emotions run at full cover. This is why regression work can be vivid. Unfortunately, I always argue with people, like when they still argue that initial sensitizing event. Well, the science now says every time you remember an event, you're rewriting the event, right? And we've all had the experience where you had a vivid memory that you like, oh, I hated that person. And then you get the backstory of why they did it, and suddenly the whole memory rewrites itself, right? And, so waking hypnosis does it a little bit different, but to me, this is the fun stuff. So I'm going to share a couple things, and we could share online afterwards. This is one I'll leave the recording going because I think people find this stuff interesting. And life on a vaudeville stage, right? I always wondered why I wanted to be an actor. Never got into it as a kid, never had that, thing. High school, I don't even think I saw a play. I think the first play I saw, I was in. My family from the South, farmers, moved up north, it wasn't in the world. It just was not in our sphere of influence. And then suddenly I decided I want to be an actor, right? I couldn't put my finger on it. And the first play I did, I still remember this vividly. Once I walked on stage and started, it felt like I was home. Most people walk out and you want to shit your pants, basically, is what happens, right? And it was at a big theater, a whole bunch of people there and all this. Should have been terrified. It was strangely exciting, and I loved it, right? And I always wondered why it was, right? And everything about it. Anyway, fast forward many years, I was doing a play down here in Florida, and the play was called Sugar Babies. It was about a vaudeville it was vaudeville performers, big musical, and I was playing the lead comic, and I'm standing off stage in a tux, holding a cigar, right? Because it was supposed to be vaudeville, and they had put the fog machine on, so the place looked smoky. Even the audience had fog machines, so it was like being in a, if you see the pictures from the old vaudevilles, it was always smoky. Some of us here are old enough to remember when you went to certain places, they were always smoky, right? One person on this call who will remain unnamed knows what it was like to go into an AA meeting and not be able to see across the room. It was so smoky, right? But anyway, I'm standing there doing that. And of course, it was the showgirl number. And there's all these young, beautiful women in really tight, young outfits on the stage, dancing, doing this stuff. And not that I was noticing. But I'm standing there, and I had this vivid, instantaneous experience of being on this kind of stage, probably in the early 1920s, late teens, that era, World War I, just afterwards when vaudeville was exploding, going back even farther. But I remember standing there, getting that experience of this is what it was like, and I was successful at it in this image, and it was cut short. Right? I didn't get the image of why it was cut short. Of course, back then you get a cold, you could die. There was didn't have the meds we have now. Could have gotten an accident, right? Like to think I was shot by a jealous husband, but I still hallucinate. But I remember having that image, and it just was like, this is why you're comfortable up here, right? Because in those kind of shows, vaudeville, you were you were right there with the audience. So, and this is what made my pull toward acting make sense, right? And why it seemed like I intuitively knew things when I'd get on stage. Because when I was new at it, I'll just share this. It was like, in fact, I was at the academy, and the only compliment I got, because I didn't know what I was doing, is the one director said, one thing you do right is you always cheat out to the audience, right? And he goes, that's the trouble, because if you're on stage and you're doing a scene with somebody, you want to face them, right? But in theater, you have to kind of face out, right? I mean, it's just, yeah. So anyway, that's my vaudeville performer experience, right? So think of some of yours. The other one was the Wounded Warrior of Rome. I've had, some issues, right? Bad knee, blew out an Achilles tendon, now my hips hurt, all this other shit, right? And I always wondered, was there some kind of cause for it, right? And this one happened, I was just thinking about it, probably after, I think it was after I had knee injections, right? The gel shots for my knees, right? And I was sitting in the chair, kicking back and thinking, where does this come, just like dozing because my legs hurt. And it was like I was a Roman soldier, looked like what we picture as the Roman regalia that the soldiers wore. It wasn't like a general's uniform, I remember that, but it wasn't like the peons of it. It was like middle road, right? And in that memory, I had this knack for crippling people. I wouldn't kill you. I'd cut your Achilles tendon, break a knee, because then you weren't a threat to the empire. You couldn't fight the same way, right? And so I don't know where that came from, but it was like, would this explain my knee and Achilles and all this other stuff that, happened? And again, rather than the randomness, like tearing my Achilles tendon, I'd like to say it happened in a karate class. My knees were loose. And I'd like to say I was sparring this world champ black belt. Actually, I was warming up the kids. and I started, sparring around with this 8-year-old, and he took my Achilles out. Yeah. But anyway, so where do these memories come from? Are they real? But they made sense to me, right? And they were useful, And both of these memories resolved something in me that just sat unexplained, right? And not because it's provable. I don't have any evidence of this, but because they were useful, And I like to think for this kind of stuff, the test isn't, is it historically verifiable, but does it resolve something real that that you or your client, if you're going to do this with your clients, what they're experiencing at the time. Right? And in a lot of ways that could go, right? Same mechanism, different destination, right? And again, I was relaxed. My attention had narrowed in both of those experiences. One, because I was sitting there and, and again, whether it was a literal past life, an echo from something in the past, something resonated with me, an archetype, or the Jungian, the energy I was in at the moment, tapped into the collective consciousness, which downloaded a memory from someone else, right? And it would also maybe explain why, if not you, maybe people in your family have a talent or a skill that no one else in your family has, right? And it's like, where did that come from? Was it, could be anything, but and nobody can prove which of those four is correct, not psychologists, mystics, psychics, right? And we land in different places on this, and it's not a failure of the work. It's just where the evidence that we currently have runs out, right? And it's important to hold curiosity, not certainty. Right? Not certainty. And again, it gives you the resolution that can be real, and ask, like, whatever it happens to be. And again, the practical value may not be metaphysical certainty, whether this memory or this experience is real or inherited or built by hypnotic imagination. If it resolves a fear or explains something, to me, that's useful. I just do this some in my office. And real quick, I'll say I started doing this in my clinic, Suncoast Hypnosis, the largest hypnosis clinic in the state of Florida. At the time, I had 3 offices. I think we were seeing 130 or 40 people a week, easy, in the 3 offices. Karen knows that kind of setup, right? But I started talking to people because they couldn't understand why they were obese and overweight when maybe other people in their family weren't, and this and that. And I don't know, I was working with a lady because she wanted an answer. So we were just doing one of these kind of techniques. And she went back to a past life where she starved to death. Right? And I'm sitting there going, well, it's only been in the last, Billy would know, probably 150 years that used to be at any given, it's still happening all over the world, but where a great majority of the population is in starvation mode, right? I mean, the Irish came here because of the potato famine. The Germans came here because of another famine. The Italians, it was the wheat famine. I mean, they came here because people were literally starving to death, right? And now if you tap into that, now there's not a shortage of food. That's not the issue, right? And it just kind of made sense to me, but your brain is kicking into that survival mode, so it's going to give an explanation, a good story to what's going on, right? And again, so have you ever had an unexplained pull or a fear or a fascination? And I can't think of the Indian tribe, but the Indian tribe that seems to not have a fear of heights, right? And at one point, they made great iron workers when we were building skyscrapers, because before all the safety things, they'd have no problem 30 stories in the air walking on a little beam. It's just like Not that other people couldn't learn that skill, but it could be an unexplained pull talent, that you can't trace to a cause. And then just think about maybe what kind of story would explain it. Maybe could be a real past life experience and ancestral memory. Maybe it's an archetype, right? And again, it doesn't have to be provable, and it doesn't require proof. It's just kind of, to me, interesting, right? And again, there may be more to this. I try to do NLP Today's every Wednesday. Next week will be none, because I will be on an airplane at this time, flying to beautiful Providence, Rhode Island, right? Because I hate Boston Airport, so I'm flying into Providence. So anyway, that's just something I thought we'd talk about today. And this one I'm going to leave on. So if you don't want to share, that's fine. But
is it a crazy idea that in 2 days, you could walk away from this convention with a system that changes every client conversation you'll ever have? You've been doing hypnosis for years, you're good. But there's always that client, the one who's resistant, the one where nothing lands. Here's what nobody taught you. Resistance isn't a client problem, it's a language problem. Dr. William Horton has spent 40 years figuring out how the FBI negotiates impossible situations, how military intelligence profiles anyone in 90 seconds, and how waking hypnosis bypasses the critical factor in everyday conversation. He put all of it into one system, Essentials of NLP Certification Training Course, post-convention. 2 days in Marlborough, Massachusetts, August 10th and 11th, 2026. Register now at ngh.net/course !223, because the best hypnotist in the room isn't the one who knows the most inductions. It's the one who never needs to convince anyone of anything. Naturally,